Prime Minister Modi has finally given a hard-hitting interview where he was asked tough questions and held accountable.
Can you explain why you fast and where does your mind go when you fast? When you're with God, where does your mind go? What role do mantras play? I'm trying to learn the Gayatri mantra.
Nope, not quite.
क्रिटिसिज्म ये डेमोक्रेसी की आत्मा है.
The irony here is pretty hard to miss, isn't it? Since Modi took office, India's ranking in the World Press Freedom Index has plunged. And journalists who speak up have been harassed in so many ways. And let's not forget, in 10 years as the Prime Minister, Modi hasn't held a single press conference. The few interviews that he does give, almost entirely scripted with reverential questions from friendly journalists or friendlier actors. Well, it's hard to tell the difference anymore.
क्या हमारे प्रधानमंत्री आम खाते हैं? ये भी उसका क्वेश्चन है कि आम खाते हैं, और अगर खाते हैं तो क्या काट के खाते हैं या ऐसे गुठली के साथ खाते हैं?
बचपन में आप इतने शरारती थे कि तालाब में से मगरमच्छ का बच्चा उठा के घर ले आए.
We've been talking about Modi's media aversion for over 11 years now. In fact, you might be thinking why she's still going on about this. But here's the thing. There's a history to this behavior. So this week, bear with me as we dig into it. Why does Modi avoid tough questions?
What's up?
And why should that worry us as a democracy? If we ever get the chance to interview Prime Minister Modi, we won't, but if we do, you can bet that there won't be any fluff. No mango questions, no childhood crocodile stories. Just real hard-hitting questions, the kind that leaders in a democracy should be answering. The same goes for any leader we interview. You see, we don't have to cozy up to them for ad money or for any other favor. But to produce quality journalism, we still need resources. We investigate, question, and hold power accountable because someone has to. But we can't do this without you. If you want journalism that's free, then you get scripted interviews. But if you want the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is, then you have to support fearless reporting. So don't just cheer us from the sidelines. Become a News Minute subscriber today. Make sure you catch a new episode of Let Me Explain every Saturday, and don't forget to write to me. Now back to our topic. Not many in India might have heard of Lex Fridman up until now. He's a science, technology, and geopolitics podcaster. But in the US, he's known to be a favorite of the right and is known to be close to Trump as well as Elon Musk. Let's quickly sample the kind of questions he asked Prime Minister Modi in this much publicized interview.
Are you afraid of death? Tell me about your childhood. How did those humble beginnings shape your outlook on life? What can you tell to those young folks who are struggling, who are lost in the world, who are trying to find their way?
Now you get why he was granted the interview. Now on to the big question. Why does Modi steer clear of press conferences? One big reason could be his need to control the narrative. Rather than dealing with unexpected questions from journalists, this is how he likes to get his message across. Carefully crafted speeches, social media posts, celebrity interactions, sit-down interviews with, let's just say, his kind of anchors, podcasts with influencers, and of course, Man Ki Baat. But press conferences are a whole different ballgame. They come with the risk of tough, unscripted questions on tricky topics, whether it's the economy, religious tensions, or the government missteps. It's way, way harder to filter or control what's being asked, which means a higher chance of awkward moments or uncomfortable exchanges.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
Modi's media aversion isn't new. Many journalists recall Modi as a media-friendly politician until he became the Gujarat Chief Minister. And even after, he was accessible.
He will now do interviews only on his terms, which is very different from the Narendra Modi I knew.
But
Narendra Modi was fascinating for me as a young journalist because he was always ready to take on any questions.
Modi's rocky relationship with the press goes back to the 2002 Gujarat riots. Reporters who have tracked his career say that he frequently held press conferences and even visited the newsrooms till then. But he was miffed with the criticism he faced by a section of the media. A veteran editor told me that Modi was especially wary of the English language media. After the riots, it was the English press that gave space to victims, human rights activists, and dissenting voices. Local papers like Gujarat Samachar or Sandesh were big and influential, but they didn't offer the same platform to critics. The English media, meanwhile, did. And it only likely deepened Modi's discomfort with the press. What followed was years of increasing hostility, open barbs against individual journalists who were critical of him in press conferences, or visits to newsroom to set the record straight when something uncomfortable was reported. The animosity continued right from the start of his tenure as Prime Minister, that's in 2014. Modi never really made press conferences a thing. By now, avoiding them had just become a part of his style and even hailed by his followers. Even when Modi travelled on his many foreign trips, he avoided the media as much as possible. Indian Prime Ministers have a tradition of addressing the press on their way back from foreign trips. But Modi did away with these freewheeling conversations. There was one press conference he did attend back in 2019. But there was a small problem with that. He just sat there almost like a prop, and he refused to answer any questions. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, did all the talking. So we're not going to really count this one. Modi is really the only Indian Prime Minister to have never held a real press conference. Now, many of his supporters ask what is the issue with that. Press conferences are usually open to multiple journalists from different outlets. They can ask spontaneous, tough questions. The leader and their team have less control. Since they're often telecast live, there's less room for coaching or editing. Follow-ups are common, making it harder to dodge uncomfortable topics. It's a public test of transparency where leaders are expected to tackle a range of issues, even the ones that they rather avoid. Sit-down interviews, on the other hand, they are a whole different game. The journalist is often handpicked by his team. Questions might be pre-approved or even agreed upon. The tone is more controlled and surprises are rare. And if there are any, they can be edited out. Sure, some interviews can be sharp, but without the unpredictability of a press conference. By opting for these tightly controlled interviews with friendly media figures, Modi sidesteps any real scrutiny. That means there's almost no setting where he can be held accountable. When journalists do get to speak to him, it's often more of a performance. Sensationalist, hyper-nationalistic coverage takes center stage. Instead of challenging him, they cheer him on. Now, for the average viewer, it sends a clear message. Whatever Modi says is the undeniable truth. Every decision he makes is unquestionably in the country's best interest. This isn't accidental. Modi has made it clear that this is the kind of journalism he prefers and approves of. And many mainstream legacy media outlets are more than happy to play along, while independent journalists like us who dare to question him face government crackdowns. It's a dangerous pattern for any democracy. Propaganda is rewarded while real journalism is treated as a threat. In his book, senior journalist Rajdeep Sardesai drops an interesting nugget. Apparently, the Prime Minister's office has its very own in-house TV production team complete with a camera crew. And in this interview, Rajdeep admitted something that shouldn't really be surprising anymore, but it's still wild to hear out loud.
So you're saying that the interviews we saw, including on India Today, were edited by the PMO and given as a package to be run?
It's there in the book.
This is confirmed.
It hasn't been challenged.
Arguably, the last time Modi gave a raw, unfiltered interview was in 2007.
अपनी दोस्ती बनी रहे यार।
In this interview, Karan Thapar questioned Modi about the 2002 Gujarat riots and his lack of regret. When Thapar brought up the Supreme Court's comparison of Modi to Nero, this happened.
What's up?
It just really took 4 minutes. Thapar later learned that Modi's team had him watch the clip again and again and again before the 2014 elections. And this was a part of his media training to avoid similar situations. Since then, Modi has almost exclusively stuck to one-way communication. A lot of mainstream TV and news outlets depend on government ads and corporate funding. So they're careful not to step on any political toes, especially when those toes belong to someone as powerful as Modi. But the real shift has been in television news, where billionaires with close ties to the government own major networks. Mukesh Ambani, India's richest man, owns the Network 18 group, which runs News 18 and CNBC. And in 2022, Gautam Adani, widely seen as Modi's ally, took over NDTV, which was once one of the few channels that hadn't fully bent. At this point, it's no secret that most major news channels are firmly in line with the government's narrative. Media bias isn't new, but the level of outright cheerleading for Modi is something else.
Mr. Prime Minister, how are you keeping your schedule nowadays? I mean, you keep a terrifying pace. आप जितने मीटिंग्स करते हैं लोग कहते हैं कि आपके अपने अफसर कीप अप करना मुश्किल हो गया है.
That pretty much sums up the state of TV news today. It's less about holding power accountable and more about applauding it. The mainstream media has also blatantly ignored some of the biggest scandals of Modi's tenure. When Hindenburg Research accused the Adani Group of pulling off the largest con in corporate history, did TV news dig into Adani's ties with the government? No. Instead, anchors rushed to defend him.
ये एक साजिश है जिसका निशाना असल में अडानी पर नहीं बल्कि प्रधानमंत्री नरेंद्र मोदी पर है.
Another example is the massive electoral bond scam. In March 2024, India's Election Commission released data that confirmed what many had long suspected. The Modi government's controversial scheme that allowed anonymous corporate donations to political parties overwhelmingly benefited the BJP. But let me remind you, the News Minute doesn't hesitate to hold those in power accountable. Along with News Laundry, Scroll, and a team of independent journalists, we launched Project Electoral Bond. Our investigations uncovered some huge stories. If you want to read these reports yourself, you can find the links in the description. But of course, if you were watching primetime news, you would have barely heard a word about this. And unfortunately, that's the pattern with mainstream media. It's not just about spinning the narrative. There's also direct action against critical journalists. Since Modi came to power, at least 36 journalists have been arrested, some under the harsh anti-terrorism laws like the UAPA. Independent media organizations have faced raids. Foreign journalists aren't immune either. Even the BBC wasn't spared. Their India offices were raided after they released a documentary scrutinizing Modi's role in the 2002 Gujarat riots. Between media silence and government crackdowns, it's getting harder and harder for independent journalism to survive. What's even more troubling is how this mindset has spread to the public too. Journalists increasingly face backlash for simply doing their jobs, often being labelled anti-national. In Modi's second and third term, this escalated into actual violence. Reporters covering communal issues were threatened and in some cases even physically attacked by mobs. Modi likes to say he welcomes criticism, but in reality he spent the last decade doing the exact opposite. What's especially alarming is how little pushback there has been. In any functioning democracy with a strong press, issues like the Manipur conflict, the India-China border standoff, and the electoral bond scandal would dominate national elections. But when most journalists aren't holding power to account, there's little chance that these issues will even register with the voters. And that's exactly the way Modi wants it. That's it for me for this week. I want you to think about whether it's okay that we're normalizing this behavior of those in power. And also, let me tell you, this week we're launching our deep reporting project on the spirituality industry. The first in the series takes a close look at the cultural and religious shift underway in Orwell and the allegations of BJP turning into a federal conclave. My producer Megha and I travelled to Orwell, spent a couple of days there, and we've come back with reports both text and video. So make sure you catch them.